You're watching Thunder Thursday with our News OK Thunder coverage team. I'm Darnell Mayberry, joined today by Anthony Slater, Thunder beat writer, Eric Horn, Thunder beat writer, and from their home in Norman and somewhere here in this great city of ours, Jenny Carlson and Barry Trammell.
Greetings.
Guys, we're talking about the Thunder Spurs. It's the series everyone wanted to see.
Raptors Pacers.
We're not talking about the Raptors Pacers. We're talking
on.
Thunder Spurs. The series everyone couldn't wait to get to in the second round. It's finally here. Game 1, Saturday night in San Antonio. The regular season, 2-2. What did we learn from that, and what can we take from that going into this series?
Very little. The first game was the first game of the regular season, the first game of Billy Donovan's coaching career. You really don't want to take much from a first game of any regular season. Then two of the other games, the Spurs rested all their stars in Oklahoma City. The Thunder rested all their stars in San Antonio. I actually took the Spurs to overtime. But so those three to me don't matter at all. And then the only one where we got, mid-season, full Thunder against full Spurs was down in San Antonio, an ABC Saturday night game. But the Thunder wasn't playing that well right then. They had just lost the day before to Minnesota at home. It was a back-to-back. They played pretty poorly. I actually think they played decent. They just couldn't score in that game.
They were good defensively in that game.
Yeah, they were. I think you could take I think one thing I take is the first game of the regular season, which I told you to take nothing from. I do take. Remember down the stretch of that game, Dion Waiters was in the game, and the Spurs tried to hide Tony Parker on them, like we expect them to do this season. And Dion Waiters backed Tony Parker and hit two big jumpers down the stretch. The Thunder's going to need that from him, so that's maybe one thing I take.
Eric, what do you take away from the regular season meetings?
Well, as Anthony said, two of the games were pretty much inconsequential because of the sitting guys on both sides. But the Thunder's defensive performance, I thought, was solid when they went in the second time into San Antonio, aside from the Russell Westbrook misstep that I always talk about.
Oh, but, you love talking about that.
I don't love talking about it, but I just can't help but talk about it. But I thought that they played really well defensively in that game, and I think that was the start of them starting to play some consistent defense, and then that led to an 8-game winning streak after that. So I think that's something that they can look back on and say that we took some positives from going into San Antonio and playing hard.
Barry, in that last meeting, the bench unit played well. Can that bode well for the Thunder going into this second-round matchup?
Well, I thought it was a very good sign that the Thunder could hang with the Spurs without Westbrook, Durant, and Ibaka. I don't know if it does anything to San Antonio, but I think it fortifies people like Cantor and Waiters and Adams and those guys that stood in there and hung tough. So, I think those guys now aren't quite as afraid. If they were afraid, there was no reason for them to be now. So I think they'll go in with a reasonable amount of confidence just based on that game.
One follow-up question, Barry. Are you having a glass of lemonade while you're on your porch? That looks comfortable.
He's having lemonade as an ode to Beyonce.
It's a swing cam.
Barry loves Beyonce.
I don't know anything about Beyonce, but I love my porch swing. I promise you that.
Swing cam.
I think the more likely scenario is a Route 44 cherry root beer, right,
That's
Barry?
true.
It is
Jacko,
2 o'clock.
You're thinking right. You're thinking right, Jacko. But unfortunately, that's later in the day because they scheduled the Google Hangout for 2 o'clock. That's when happy hour starts. So I gotta go after the Hangout.
Hey, Jenny, what about it? The Thunder Spurs series, what did you take away from the regular season matchup? What do you think that would mean, if anything, going into this postseason matchup?
Well, I don't take a bunch from it, seriously. I think a lot of what the guys talked about earlier is true, but I do think it's interesting, that the fact that these teams have played so much, and yet there are a lot of unknowns heading into this series. You look at the way Serge Ibaka played in the first round of the playoffs, it's almost like he's a guy that, not this Serge Ibaka. This Serge Ibaka didn't play those regular season games, so how does he factor into things? I think that's a really interesting aspect, that you've got two teams that played so much in the regular season, and yet, if Serge Ibaka plays that well, how much difference could that make for the Thunder? If the Thunder gets great bench production like it did in the Dallas series from Cantor and Waiters and on down the list, how does that factor into things? So I think it's really intriguing that you've got two teams that know each other so well and yet have a lot of different sort of factors playing into this series.
Yeah, one memorable thing from this series, Eric wrote about it in his story a couple of days ago, the Kawhi Leonard I think he had a career high, like 32 points in the opener here. The Spurs lost, but he also had that block on Durant where he came over, swatted like a Kevin Durant pull-up jumper, which I'm not sure that's ever been blocked by anyone else ever. So that's the matchup to watch, obviously.
Yeah, and going back and for a story I did previously this year on turnovers, Kawhi was just a defensive wrecking ball in that game. I mean, he was able to guard on the perimeter. He was able to go in and get strip steals on guys, and he's going to be the guy to watch, him and Durant, and it's going to be a great matchup.
Barry, you had something?
Yeah, I was going to say that the biggest reason that season opener is sort of irrelevant to me is because that was LaMarcus Aldridge's debut with the Spurs. He took about a third of the season to really, maybe half the season, to get really adjusted. He's a much bigger part of this San Antonio team than what we saw earlier in the season.
And
so that, for me, is the biggest reason why that October game is sort of irrelevant.
Yeah, and Durant, I mean, remember, that's his first real game off his third foot surgery, the really serious foot surgery. I mean, I'm just, like, game one is going to dictate how I look at the rest of the series. I think in some ways nothing about the season series really does.
Barry mentioned LaMarcus Aldridge. Here are his scoring average by month with the Spurs this season. October, just 2 games, 10.5. One of those, I think, was the Thunder game. That was late October. Then he bumped up to 15.9 in November and December, 16.7 in January, 20.5 points per game in February, 22.6 in March, and then April, only 5 games, 17.6. So to Barry's point, LaMarcus Aldridge obviously had a much better season as the season went on. Jenny mentioned the Dallas series. How much more confident, Anthony, are you in this Thunder team and their chances against San Antonio after seeing how they dismantled Dallas in the first round?
More confident. I mean, the funny thing is that I actually picked the Thunder in 6 before the Dallas series. I'd still, I just have this gut feeling about this team that they're just going to play with that desperate edge they need defensively. I think their athleticism can give, the Spurs problem. And then where I see the growth as far as the Dallas series, we've talked about it, but their big men to me are getting better by the game. I really believe the Canner-Adams combo is more comfortable. Adams was doing more things than we've ever seen by Game 5 of the Dallas series than he had a month ago. So I think the Thunder have an interior advantage that nobody's really talking about and nobody may realize because, hey, Tim Duncan, LaMarcus Aldridge, Boris Diaw, David West, these Grizzly vets. But you got a 22 and 23-year-old who I think are about to emerge onto the national stage.
Eric?
Yeah, I think that I've extended my prediction. Instead of Spurs in 6, which I initially had, I'm going to go with Spurs in 7 now.
Don't get wild now.
That's not too wild. I think I think if need be, the Thunder can take it back to San Antonio. With what Anthony said, the bigs are playing extremely well coming off of that Dallas series. They should have confidence. Dion Waiters should have confidence going into that series, not just because of the mismatch he could potentially have against a Patty Mills or Tony Parker, but because he's also coming off a Dallas series where he had 3 strong games in a row. So I think that the Thunder has, I guess, earned my extra game in this series coming up.
And you mentioned Waiters and Adams having confidence. Like the Stars should have more confidence in them because of what they did in the first round. Which, with the 2-on-5, do they trust guys down the stretch? That should help.
We're saving predictions to later. Eric, you got a little bit off script there.
I think I kind of did too,
We're saving those for later. Barry.
How about Game 1 predictions for later?
Game 1 predictions later too. Barry, if you are more confident in the Thunder team after watching what they did against Dallas, how much more confident are you and what makes you so?
Well, I'm confident because, I'm more confident because of how well they played. It was historic in nature, the domination to win 4 games by 95 points and then a 1-point loss. I think that's right. But anyway, 91 point differential, I think, which is, there's only been 2 100-point differentials in NBA history in a playoff series. So, the Thunder had that awful game 2.
I think the Spurs might have just put up one of those that you're talking about.
The Spurs were 88 with Memphis.
Okay.
The Warriors were 94 with Houston. So all 3 of the West heavyweights were dominant. But that's what you say, well, the Dallas was shorthanded. They were. Dallas was, a shell of its former self. It was. But that's what you ought to do to a team like that, and the Thunder did it. So, it's going to be much tougher. But I think the Thunder can reasonably say, going into this series, that it's playing well.
Jenny, how much more confident are you?
I I'd say a decent amount. I think my biggest concern remains the concern that we've had all year about this team, and that being the inconsistent nature that we see them ride every once in a while. We saw it in that second game. Obviously, only lost by a point, despite a just awful shooting night by not only Durant but also Westbrook, missing 40 combined shots, and they still only lose by one, and find a tenth or 2/10 of a second, and they win that game. So I am saying that, understanding that, but still, you have to question consistent focus and play, which is exactly what San Antonio has done for decades, it seems like, and what they've definitely done this year. So you've got a team that's a model of consistency against a team that has struggled with that, and is that ultimately a decider in a series that's really going to come down, I think, to some pretty close games and some pretty small margins. Does the Spurs, consistency just bite the Thunder in enough ways that they can't overcome it? I'd like to be wrong, and I think if it does go to 7, you've got a great chance to win it if you're the Thunder, because anything can happen in a Game 7. But I just worry about that inconsistency.
Jenny, we'll stick with you. We talked about the confidence. Let's talk about the concern. What still concerns you? You just mentioned some of them. What concerns you most about this Thunder team at this point in the season?
Well, I do think that when you're looking at non-Durant Westbrook players, although they played great in the Dallas series, can they get some good production on, again, a consistent basis out of Canner, Waiters, Ibaka? While Ibaka was great in that series, then in Game 5 he gets into early foul trouble, and I think ended up with 2 points. Didn't make any shots from the floor. Was really not very effective offensively, which he'd been great in the first 4 games. So, where's he at when he comes into this series? He's been such a spur killer over the years. Can Dion Waiters be a factor in this series? And if he has an off shooting night, does that affect his defense? Because they're going to need him to play great defense. You don't want to let a guy like Danny Green, Ginobili, on down the list of those perimeter guys get going. They could have a Mike Miller night against the Thunder. You just don't want that. So, again, consistency is my catchphrase in this one. The Thunder's got to show me the first couple games that they're ready to stand toe-to-toe with the Spurs in that consistent way that the Spurs play so much.
Barry, what's your biggest concern about this team at this point?
Oh, I think it's the team defense. I think they'll score to some degree on San Antonio, more than San Antonio allows, but this team has not played great defense consistently throughout the year. Now, in the half court, they've been much better than transition. The Spurs are old. They don't really want to run. So that's a plus for the Thunder. But just getting lost on occasion on defense is a season-long trend. And against the Spurs, that can kill you. This is a team that doesn't want to shoot a lot of threes, but they'll certainly take an open one if you give it to them. Certainly will take easy shots from the mid-range. It's a mid-range shooting team, which is sort of an anomaly in the NBA. The Spurs know what they're doing, and the Thunder doesn't always know what it's doing on defense. That, to me, is the biggest worry going into this series.
To piggyback off that, just look at Game 5 of the Dallas series. I think one of the first plays of the game, I believe it was Dirk or somebody, back screen Kevin Durant. He's not even paying attention. Justin Anderson just whips right by him, easy alley-oop dunk. Russell Westbrook in Game 2. We're talking about a big, important Game 2 when that series wasn't decided. Down the stretch, the reason, part of the reason they lose that game is, yes, Kevin Durant goes 7 of 33. But the other reason is because Raymond Felton torches Russell Westbrook, 3 plays down the stretch. Dirk, that back screen play that was kind of highlighted in an article we did, they can't have these breakdowns. They could have them against Dallas and still win those games. They can't have those against San Antonio and win games.
I thought it was Eric that liked to talk about Westbrook's defense.
No, he just has his one play.
I have one
where
play.
He gambles. He tries to get LaMarcus. This was in a Spurs game. He tried to get LaMarcus Aldridge, who was holding it. You know how you go behind him sometimes.
I remember it well.
Aldridge senses it, hits Danny Green in the corner. Green hits one of his only threes. He's a key. We can get to that later, but he's a key in this series.
My biggest concern is Serge Ibaka. I mean, as he goes, it seems like the team defense goes. It seems like the team goes. Several Thunder players have said it. Billy Donovan has said it. When he's on, the Thunder's on. And we saw him close out the Dallas series with a 2-point game. He had some strong games leading up to that. And it's a concern of mine that is he going to come back into this series and show fatigue, having to battle LaMarcus Aldridge, who's played well against him at times. Maybe you see some Steven Adams on LaMarcus Aldridge sometime in this series because Steven Adams has played against Dirk and did well in the last series. Maybe give Ibaka that breather. So if the Thunder can work to keep Ibaka as consistent as he was for the most part of the Dallas series, I think that's going to go a long way in them winning this one.
You're watching Thunder Thursday with our News OK Thunder coverage team. Our Thunder playoff coverage is brought to you by JM Marshall Square, OKC's only big house apartment community. In today's paper, Anthony Slater wrote a tremendous article about Enes Kanter and how the Thunder has embraced him as a person and gotten the most out of him as a player. Anthony, you can talk a little bit about that article if you like, some things that maybe didn't make the paper for online or in the paper. But what I'd like to know from you, because Enes Kanter is your boy, what should we expect from him in this series?
Some of what you got in the regular season. I think he averaged like 15 and 13 in 4 Spurs games. You know, a couple of those, like we said, were against backups, or he was starting because, you know, the Spurs were playing nobody. But, you know, I think how does Greg Popovich really try to attack his weakness, which everyone knows is defense, it's pick and roll? How does he handle David West coming off the bench, a better big than he usually faces coming off most benches? So he will be important to watch. But if you remember the game, the Russell Westbrook gamble game, whatever you want to call it, in San Antonio, Kanter was really good in that game. It was an ABC Saturday night game. I think he had like 17 and 13. He had one like pick and roll dunk. Like, he can give the Spurs problem. People always want to highlight how other teams can give him problems. He gives other teams problems. So I'd expect that out of him.
And we'll expect them to probably play more down the stretch in this series too.
It's tough because Serge Ibaka is really important against the team. He's playing really well. Steven Adams,
really well.
What he's been doing. That's the crazy part about this team is you got these 3 big men who probably all deserve to play down the stretch, but only 2 are going to.
Yeah. Barry, Jenny, you got any thoughts on what we'll see from Enes Kanter in this series?
Oh, I think he matches up really well with the Spurs, except for the Serb. I think the big Serb gives him some problems. I think.
Who is the big Serb? For those that don't know, Barry.
Boban.
Give us the name. Boban something or
Boban
another.
Marjanovic. Hey, does the Serb give him more problems than the Tunisian? That's what he was calling Mejri the whole series.
I think the Serb does give Kanter more problems than the Tunisian.
Can I get a quick key on my computer, by the way, so I can just type, like, hit a key and get his name to pop up if I need to?
It's not as once you type it a few times, it's pretty easy.
But I think, you know, Kanter gives West problems. He'll give Boris Diaw problems. He'll give all the Spurs big guys problems, with the possible exception of Duncan. Except the big guy, the Serb, is 7'3", and Kanter sometimes has some difficulty with really tall guys who aren't all that athletic.
He gets his shot blocked.
Because he doesn't really jump over anybody. So it's a case of keep your eye on him. That guy won't play. I don't know if he'll take the court when Enes Kanter's not on the floor. But I think Greg Popovich has his eye on the Serb to counter Enes Kanter.
Can we just call him the Serb from here on out? Is that allowed?
That's what I'm calling him.
Have we prepared the headlines for the Serbian, like our turkey shoots?
I don't think he's going to have quite the impact for a headline in the Oklahoman, but
Probably
we'll see. You never know. Bad news for the Thunder if he does.
Boban's watching this, and he's going to have a podium game just because of this.
That would be bad.
That would be very bad for the Thunder.
Jenny, Enes Kanter played 20.5 minutes per game in the Dallas series. Over, under, that many minutes in the Spurs series?
Oh, great question, Darnell. I'm going to say over. Does that seem crazy?
Nope.
I mean, I think he'll go over that. I mean, I think part of the reason why his numbers weren't a little higher in the Dallas series was they had some dominating wins, and he, didn't have to play late. So I would not be surprised to see him go over that.
A lot of these guys, one thing to look at in the series, a lot of the main pieces their minutes are going up. They're not going to be blowing teams out, and they're going to be desperate. Like Russell Westbrook and Kevin Durant may play, 40 42, 43, 44 minutes a night in the series,
Yeah.
which is huge for the Thunder. I mean, because that's less minutes of Randy Foye. That's less minutes of some of the fringe guys, Kyle Sigler.
Well, that's also more minutes of your best lineup. I mean, that
Yep.
starting lineup
Yep.
is best by far.
It's a good point. As Barry mentioned, there was a lot of blowouts in that Dallas
Yeah.
series, so minutes are going to be going up for everyone. Jenny, we'll start with you with this one. Is Billy Donovan ready for this series? You wrote a fantastic column today on Billy Donovan and how much success he's had in his first year as an NBA head coach. Threw out a ton of great statistics that backed up your claim and supported your premise. But is he ready for this? He's going against Greg Popovich and the vaunted Spurs. Can he handle this?
That's a great question, and I don't pretend to know the exact answer right now, Darnell. I mean, I do think that I think people around here, I mean, I think it's like a lot of things. When you see something all the time, you may sort of lose sight of the overall big picture, and that was one of my biggest intentions today in writing that, was to step back for a second and say, now wait a second, let's look at just what Billy Donovan has been able to accomplish this year. And it's pretty significant when you think about the nucleus of this team being in place for all these seasons that some of these statistics were marked against, and yet they've seen some significant improvements, and a lot of it's been offensive. I understand that, but it's been so dramatic offensively that you have to wonder, how is that Popovich Spur group going to contend with that? I mean, this is really a historically good offense in a lot of ways. So, I don't know if Billy Donovan is going to be able to handle the chess match, but he has always embraced the process, the learning, the challenge. That's one of the things that I'm sure Anthony, I'm sure Eric, they would say that they've heard him say again and again, that he has enjoyed, sort of challenging himself. Well, this is a huge challenge. And so it's going to be really interesting to see what adjustments they make to try to counter what Greg Popovich is doing. But let's not forget, Billy Donovan's had some games where he's thrown out some stuff that's worked fantastically. You look at that first Warriors game, he did some things that were really, really nice. So don't count him out. He doesn't have the experience. He doesn't have the years. He doesn't have the same number of wins that Greg Popovich does in the NBA. But he's a guy that to my accounting, has done a really, really solid job in his first year.
Barry, we asked about your confidence level in the Thunder as a team. Where's your confidence level in Billy Donovan, and do you think he's ready for this?
Oh, heck yeah. I don't think that's a factor at all. I don't think NBA in-game coaching is that big a deal. I think your best coaching is done in the practice gym, in the preseason, installing schemes and cultures and habits. I don't think too many games are won and lost on the sidelines of a game. Greg Popovich is at the top of the list, but Billy Donovan's he's no mental liability. He's going to be just fine. This game's going to come down to guarding each other, and the one thing I think you can say about this is one criticism in the postseason for Scotty Brooks was he was slow to react on lineups and changes. Late in his career, we finally saw it in 14. He benched Thabo Cephalosha, but the truth of the matter is Billy's been fiddling with his lineup all year in terms of, the rotation all year. Guys go in, guys go out. I don't think he has some sort of set formula that he's going to follow off the cliff. I got no worries about Billy Donovan.
I mean, I agree with a lot of what Barry's saying as far as, like, I think Billy, has shown some good signs. I do believe a heavy amount of coaching is behind the scenes that we don't see. But, I'm going to challenge him a little on that the in-game coaching doesn't matter. I mean, we could see games in this series swung because of bad timeout. We saw a Warriors game down the street because remember Kevin Durant gets caught in the corner. They don't call timeout. Durant panics. Some of that's on Durant. Might need to call timeout there too. So there are times, and potentially in this series, where in-game coaching may matter. We haven't seen Billy in this type of environment yet. We haven't seen him try to make an in-series adjustment against a Popovich because Dallas wasn't challenging them to make any type of adjustment. They were just so outmanned. I'm not saying Billy can't handle it, but it's something to watch.
I'm interested to see how he reintegrates Kyle Sigler because I think it's coming.
Oh, joy. These Thunder fans are going to love it.
Yeah, I'm sure. And like Barry said, Billy's been tinkering with the rotations all season, and Kyle Singler's a guy who matches up better with the Spurs than he does with the Mavericks, because the Mavericks didn't have that wing for him to guard. We've talked about that before. And now they're going to have a guy in Kawhi, where they're going to maybe want to throw Kyle Singler at him at times, because Durant's not going to want to. They're not going to want to have Durant on him the entire game. So, what's Billy going to do with the rotation? How much is he going to play Kyle Singler? Is he going to play Cam Payne at all? How much is he going to have Dion Waiters and Randy Foye acting as distributors? Randy Foye's coming off of a bad series. Dion Waiters played well, and he was good in that part-time distributor role. So it'll be interesting to see how he handles the bench lineup more than anything.
Barry, I got to come back to you because, in all honesty, I'm interested that you said that you don't think. I'm shocked, not interested. I'm shocked that you don't think that in-game coaching, especially in the playoffs, matters at the NBA level. So what would you consider a successful series for Billy Donovan?
I think if the Thunder plays, 6-7 really competitive games, and if they come out on the high side, great. But if they come up a little short against an historically great team, then I think that's okay too. I mean, If we're asking Billy Donovan to beat the Spurs to justify his rookie year, I think that's a little bit of a high standard, because San Antonio is not just a great team; they're historically great. They're one of the 12 best teams in NBA history regular season. So the Thunder's got an uphill climb here, and if they're competitive, to me that's a sign that Billy Donovan did his job.
We'll stick with you, Barry. Key to the series, key matchup. Give me the biggest key matchup in your mind to this series, and why?
I think it's Kevin Durant, Kawhi Leonard, and I think the Thunder needs Kevin Durant to win that matchup.
How does he win it?
And he's got to shoot well. He's got to play solid defense. If Kevin Durant can get in the 30-point range with efficiency, the Thunder's got a good chance to win. If he has some of his, 9 for 26 nights, 26 points, that's going to be rough for the Thunder to win. Leonard won't make it easy on him, but Durant's capable of winning that duel. It's a matchup of two All-NBA guys. I think, Kawhi could win it, but if Durant wins it, the Thunder's got a much better chance of advancing to the Western Conference Finals.
Jenny, we're coming to you. Key matchup to the series.
Yeah, I'll go with, I'm seconding Barry, but I got asked an interesting question on the Power Lunch live chat this morning, that if Durant and Leonard play to a draw in their matchup, who wins the series? And I came around to saying that I think Westbrook could be the difference maker if that's the case, because here's a superstar. Apologies to Mark Cuban. Here's a superstar that the Thunder has that the Spurs don't have. I mean, LaMarcus Aldridge is great, and obviously the old three are great, and they've got some other great pieces, but none of the rest of those Spurs are nearly the player that Russell Westbrook is. So does this series potentially turn on how Westbrook can dominate a matchup with Parker, how he keeps in check whomever he's guarding when Parker's not on the floor? Because they've really handled Tony Parker great. I mean, that obviously Westbrook's just athletically advantaged in ways that Tony Parker has trouble with. So, can Westbrook really dominate his matchup? Could that possibly determine the series if KD and Leonard play to a draw? I agree with Barry. I think KD needs to win that matchup for sure. But having a second superstar on your roster, you want to have superstar play out of him. Westbrook versus whomever the Spurs throw at him could really be determining in my mind.
Okay, Eric, if your matchup is Kawhi Leonard, Kevin Durant, give me an underrated matchup in this series, or a sleeper matchup.
I think Dion Waiters against the Spurs reserves, whoever it may be it a Patty Mills, or if he's on Kyle Anderson at times.
Tony
Parker. Like we saw in the first game of the season, Dion Waiters taking advantage of that size matchup. Tony Parker's going to be a liability no matter when he's on the court. So whoever's on Tony Parker has to exploit that. Dion Waiters can be that guy. And also the defense he's going to bring, too. He's going to be able to guard multiple positions. And if Dion Waiters can play the way he did in those last 3 games of the Dallas series, that'll be great for the Thunder.
That's like the 5th guy they really need in their closing lineup.
If you get what you need out of Serge, and you presume Kent.
For sure.
Yeah.
And Adams and everyone. First to the Kawhi. I mean, this isn't my matchup to watch because one thing you got to remember about this Kawhi Durant matchup is Greg Popovich's probably going to throw Kawhi on Westbrook at times. He did it in that game we were talking about earlier. He's going to have Danny Green on Kevin Durant. I think they're going to really toggle those guys back and forth to continually give different matchups. If Westbrook is going off, he may throw Leonard for 2 quarters straight on him. So that's an interesting coaching, I guess, matchup to watch right there. But Enes Kanter against Dave West off the bench, I think it's very interesting. The Thunder's bench needs Kanter's massive production, but they can't have him getting torched by West. They can't have him jumping for David West, kind of crafty pump fakes and kind of just giving him 2 quick free throws at the line, getting him in pick and rolls and pick and pops.
So what I hear you saying is if Kanter and West play to a draw, advantage Spurs.
Yeah, I'd say that.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about the guy who's just 3rd and 6th man of the year vote, and they need him to be a 6th man of the year type. They need him to anger the analytic people online with more production than they want to see out of Enes Kanter.
Got it. Last question, lightning round. We'll start with Eric since he already gave away his prediction.
Let's
go
game 1 and
Game
series.
1 and then series.
Game 1, if the Thunder are going to get a game, I think it could be Game 1. So I'll pick Thunder to win Game 1.
Okay, bold.
I'll go bold.
Okay, and then the series you said?
Spurs in 7.
Spurs in 7.
I am like him taking the Thunder in Game 1. I think we worry about this team energy-wise, defensively at times. I don't think we're going to need to worry about that Game 1 of this series. I mean, they're getting locked in for 4 or 5 straight days thinking about it. So I think they're going to come out amped, even in that environment. And I think since I'm picking them to win the series in 6, I think they have to get this Game 1. So I'm picking Game 1 because I'm picking them in 6.
Jenny?
I've got the Spurs in 7, which I think I picked them in 6 when we picked a series before the playoffs began. So I'm giving the Thunder a little more leash in the series, but I'm still going Spurs in 7, and I think Spurs win Game 1. I mean, I agree that I think the Thunder will be locked in, but Spurs will be locked in too. Home court. In. Yeah, I see that place going crazy, and I'm going Spurs.
Barry, what about it? What do you got? Game 1 and series.
Barry just woke up.
I'll take Spurs 1, Game 1. I'll take Spurs in 7.
Spurs in 1, Spurs in 7.
Barry needs that Route 44 right now.
Yeah, he needs some help. I picked. I think I picked Spurs in 5 before it started. Before the postseason started, I'm more confident in the Thunder now.
6?
But not that much more
5?
confident. I still think the Thunder struggles defensively. Yeah. I think they struggle with turnovers. I think they struggle with overall consistency from other players. And I think that could really hurt you against San Antonio.
We talked about it a little in the Dallas series. The Spurs don't turn you over a ton. I mean, sometimes the Thunder just give it away.
Right. Which they do a lot.
Leonard will turn you over, but pretty much they're kind of in their concepts. So they're not. So I think that a little bit plays in the Thunder's favor. What are you still going 5?
No, I think 6.
They're going to end it here.
And late game situations is also a big one.
That's my biggest worry.
A big one for the Thunder. So there's so many things that I think have to go right for the Thunder to really extend this series and potentially win it. That I'm still going to pick the Spurs, probably in 6, but I think it's potentially going 7 as well. Thanks for joining us on Thunder Thursday. Again, our Thunder playoff coverage is brought to you by J. Marshall Square, OKC's only big house apartment community. Thanks, guys.